Hey Coyotes, welcome to lab number 8. In this lab we were talking about resting blood pressure. Specifically, we're paying attention to two things. We're going to look at the pulse pressure as well as the mean arterial pressure. Shortened up, you can see that it's called PP or MAP. Something to point out with MAP is the fact that when we are recording blood pressure, we end up with two numbers, the systolic pressure and diastolic pressure. And it's usually reported as a ratio. The top number is usually larger. The bottom number is usually smaller. Because of this, we have some difficulties when we're doing some analysis, specifically using software packages. Something like SPSS or even Excel, because we have these two numbers, they are disconnected. So a way we connect them is through these mean arterial pressures, which we take a combination of a few things, we put it together, and it turns into one number. So that's kind of the relevance and the importance with lab number 8. We also get some insights into what's going on with the physiology, which we touch on in the lab lecture, the video lab lecture for this week. So as always, let's start at the top and work our way down. We can see we have the basic information. We have two sheets all together. I'll go ahead and draw a little bit of a squiggly line, kind of indicate that. So we're dealing with two individuals, a male as well as a female. We have the ages, same age. You can see the height difference in centimeters and the weight. And we have the type of gauge we were using, and we talked about these in the lecture video this week. We are taking blood pressure in a seated position, which we should be doing with initial kind of testing. However, there are some times where you might want to do it standing or supine, laying on the ground. But really, for our purposes, and most likely 99% of the time, we will do this seated position. Seated position is important because it actually gets the heart level with the site of testing, specifically that artery in the arm that you're aiming to close off with the tourniquet style cuff. We are dealing with the right arm, and you can do right or left, but when it comes to initial testing, we usually aim for the right arm. So you can kind of see the trend I'm trying to set here. When we are coming in for the first time to get a blood pressure test, we want to do a seated position, and we want to use the right arm. We also want to use the right size of a cuff, and it's worth denoting the actual girth of the limb when we're doing that. And if we're doing a child, an adult, or a large adult. So this is kind of the basic information that we need to gather so we can set up the test the best we can. We always aim to use the same tester, but you can see from the first trial to the second trial, there was actually two different people testing. So really, this is not just one blood pressure test. It is actually two different trials. Now, the extent of why they're doing a pre and post test could be due to research, adding some kind of exercise intervention between sets. So we are dealing with resting, so this would be probably two different bouts of exercise or some kind of beginning testing grounds for like a multiple kind of testing procedure. But most common, it will be more of maintenance and monitoring with the more of the public health, doctor visits, nurse practitioners, RDs checking blood pressure. So we know there's some different sounds associated with the heart. The first sound is dealing with the systolic blood pressure, and you can kind of see what we got there. And then with the diastolic pressure, there is a fourth and a fifth sound, but the sound we want to record and report is the fifth sound. So does it really matter that there's a fourth sound not reported? Not for our intents and purposes. So don't feel like you have to report anything there. We really just need these two measurements. So moving down to the average, because we have two different measurements, we want to average them up. As you can see right there, average them up. Now, to get the blood pressure average, we have to do a little bit of math. So, get a different color real quick. You notice we have trial 1 here and trial 2. And we took 2 measurements for each trial. So if I draw the blue line right there, you can kind of see the separation between the first test and then the second test within the same trial. And then for the second trial, this was the first test and the second test. So really we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers to deal with. So for our systolic blood pressure, we need to get the average, which we have to add the 4 numbers up. 132, 136, 124, 132. So we want to add those up, and that will give us our systolic blood pressure, and then the number that we then need to divide with how many numbers we have. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to divide it by 4. For our diastolic blood pressure, we have 74, 78, 80, and 74. Again, we add those up, divide by 4. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll bust out my handy dandy calculator, and we'll do the diastolic pressure first. So 74 plus 78 plus 80 plus 74, 306, and we divide by the 4, and that should give us 76.5. I'm just going to go ahead and round it out to 77. Let's go ahead and do the other one too. The systolic blood pressure. 132 plus 136 plus 124 plus 132 equals 524. Divide by 4, and we get 131. So let's go ahead and put those numbers in there. So for our systolic, we want 131. And the second number was 76.5, but we're just going to go ahead and round it up a little bit to make things a little bit more whole. So this is a little tricky spot here. So make sure, again, when you're calculating the average, and look, and here's, you got to make sure we pay attention what it's asking. Average all measurements. So it doesn't mean just these two. It means all of them. This would probably be the thing that gets people the most with this lab. And you're going to do the same thing down here as well. So once you get that, now we just do some simple math. So the pulse pressure is dealing with a simple subtraction. You want to subtract the first with the fifth sound. So your first systolic with the fifth systolic. So now that we have this average, what are we going to do? We're going to take 131 and we're going to subtract 77, which give us the pulse pressure of 54. I'm not going to bust out the calculator for that one. Now, it's a little bit more tricky, but still pretty straightforward. Just follow what is being asked. So we're going to take the fifth sound, the diastolic sound, which was 77, and we're going to take the pulse pressure divided by 3, which, let's get our calculator out again. So their pulse pressure was 54 divided by 3, and that gives us 18. Oops, a little crazy with my mouse. And when we add those up, we should get 95 millimeters of mercury. So being that this is such a simple lab, I'm just going to kind of walk through it with you guys to this point. The rest of it is going to be you guys as a clinician and categorizing this with their blood pressure category on table 16.3, as well as the evaluation. Please, guys, I'm pretty much begging you at this point. Students are still not filling out the evaluation. Knowing how to do this stuff is important, but at the end of the day, giving good, sound recommendations to people has to be based off this information. So practicing knowing if someone has a blood pressure, say, of 140/80, what does that fall under? Isn't that the cutoff for something? Is that a good blood pressure or is that a bad blood pressure? And if it's a bad blood pressure, what do we need to do with them? Do we need to create some lifestyle related changes? Maybe. I have to let you guys make those recommendations for yourself. It's good practice. All right, so for this this second one down here, I think you guys have a good handle on it, so go ahead and take a crack. If you have any questions, let me know.